Kaapo Kakko fires shots at management as well as possibly his veteran teammates, and the Rangers sleepwalk their way to a 2-0 loss against the equally terrible Nashville Predators.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1207 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So more drama in Rangerland. Obviously, the just disgraceful performance against the Nashville Predators last night. You've got players after the game claiming that it was a little bit better, and maybe it was, but I mean, that is a small consolation prize, losing to the team with the worst record in the NHL for the second time in about a week and a half. They did the same thing against the Blackhawks. I think it was like 9 or 10 days ago, whatever it was. But honestly, the craziest part about this Ranger team to me, we will get to that game in due time here in today's episode. But the circus that's taking place on the ice is honestly taking a little bit of a backseat to the circus that's taking place off the ice. Every single day, there's new reports about discontent in the locker room, and they're going to trade this guy, and this is going to happen. And I don't know. The whole thing is just a mess right now. And yesterday, we got some pretty eye-opening quotes from Kaapo Kakko, of all people. So we're going to spend some time talking about him today, and basically just to go through all these quotes here that Kakko had before this game. Obviously, he was unhappy about the fact that he was a healthy scratch the game before this one, and I wholeheartedly understand why. Kaapo Kakko is going to turn himself into a hero among Ranger fans with some of these quotes. Just the fact that he actually called them out on their BS, and the fact that, he actually said something, other than just generic, well, we got to be better next time kind of quotes that we hear from all these supposed Ranger leaders. I mean, on one hand, when you're playing this badly, if you're one of the Ranger leaders, there's only so much you can say. It's not like we're going to be satisfied with anything that Kreider or Fox or Mika says right now. But be that as it may, at least it was nice to see a couple of quotes here from Kaapo Kakko, once again, of all people who, kind of went a little bit off script here, shall we say. Let's start with this as it pertains to Kaapo Kakko, because I know there's going to be some people. I saw it on social media. I saw it in the comment section to a video that I posted yesterday after these comments came out. Very short video on YouTube about Kaapo Kakko. That Kaapo Kakko, he deserved to be healthy scratch, and he's a bust, and he's no good, and what has he ever done? And he's talking about being a young player and being a young player being scratched, but he's in his sixth year. All those, I wouldn't call him a bust. Everything else is true, though. A bust to me is somebody that just gives you absolutely nothing and basically flames out of the league in a handful of seasons. Kaapo Kakko is going to have, I think a pretty long and pretty solid career. But I will acknowledge this, because the people that are, I guess you could say the anti-Kakko crowd or whatever you want to call it, you're not wrong when you say that as the number 2 overall pick, this guy has fallen well short of expectations. And if you're a Kakko fan, I think you at least have to admit that. This guy came in number 2 overall that season. It was him and Jack Hughes. One was going to go number 1. Other was going to go number 2. Kaapo Kakko, ends up going number 2. And he does some good things for this team. But, 6 years into his career, if we knew that these were going to be his offensive numbers, I think we would have been concerned. And I think that would have certainly been a letdown, compared to the expectations that were, that accompany any player that gets taken number 2 overall. And Kaapo Kakko is included in that. So, yeah, I get it. Look, he hasn't been a great player. It's not like he's been fantastic lately, but no Ranger player has been fantastic lately. And the big issue that I have is that Kaapo Kakko was made the scapegoat. I tweeted something the other day, I think it was like right after this news broke, that Kakko is outworking and out hustling a bare minimum of 75% of his New York Ranger teammates. And that's a pretty low bar right now, but the fact remains the same. He is giving you an honest effort a lot more than a lot of his teammates currently are. And with all that said, let's go ahead and go through some of these Kaapo Kakko quotes here that came out before the game. This is what he had to say about the healthy scratching. I was surprised, yeah. I know you got to do something as a coach when you're losing games, but I think it's just easy to pick a young guy and boot him out. That's how I feel, to be honest. And again, he's not. I mean, he is still on the young side. He's 23. I can't really look at him though as like being like a fresh faced player in the NHL. Like I said, this is year 6 for Kaapo Kakko, so I will say that. But then he was asked if it was frustrating for him that he's been singled out a few times, because this is not the first time we've saw Kaapo Kakko as a healthy scratch. I think one of the more infamous examples was Gerard Gallant's first year, Game 6 against the Lightning, down 3-2, and you scratch Kaapo Kakko for Dryden Hunt. Not that Kakko had done anything great there in that series either, but you're really going to sit this guy down for Dryden Hunt of all people? That's what they did. This is what Kakko had to say about being singled out a few times. Yeah, for sure. I can say the same thing all the time. The whole team is playing kind of bad, and I get that you got to do something. I don't know. If I were coach, I would do something. Also, I was surprised it was me at this point. I read this, and it feels to me like the Rangers finally broke Kaapo Kakko. This is somebody who, and again, you can critique his play all you want. You can talk about how he's not even come close to living up to the hype of being the number 2 overall pick. This is somebody that has always been accountable. This is somebody that's always been honest. You go back to the end of the season last year, he's being asked about the season he had and what the future might hold, because he didn't have a contract at that time, and there was no guarantee that he was going to be back. He always said that he wants to be here. He loves the fans. He loves his teammates. He loves the city. He loves winning, all that good stuff, all the kind of things that you want to hear that we don't ever hear from anybody that wears a letter on this team. And these are just, common sense kind of things that you can say and kind of win yourself over in the eyes of the fans. And I think that's why there's so many Ranger fans that are backing Kaapo Kakko right now, because we're well aware of the fact that he has not lived up to being the number 2 overall pick. But when you say things like that and you put over the city and you put over the fans and you talk about how much you want to be here and all this other stuff, and then you do re-sign with the team, that means something. That does carry some weight, I think, with Ranger fans and New York sports fans in general. And I'll tell you something else here. The Rangers' next home game is on Sunday at 12:30. If Kaapo Kakko is still here, which is no guarantee because his name is coming up quite a bit in trade talks, the fans ought to be giving him a standing ovation and cheering for him, because, again, at least somebody on this team went off script, said something that wasn't completely generic, and called out the Rangers on their recent nonsense when it comes to the play of the veterans. I mean, he didn't single them out by name, of course, but it feels like shots were kind of fired there. And honestly, the hypocrisy of making Kaapo Kakko the healthy scratch for a recent game. And he might be a healthy scratch in a future game too. I hope that doesn't happen. But to me, this is the most noteworthy quote coming out of the Kaapo Kakko meeting with the beat reporters, because intentional or not, this felt like, this is the quote right here that felt like it was a shot at some of the underperforming veterans on this team. This is what Kakko had to say. I haven't been on the ice too much when opponents score a goal. I have not been the worst guy, but that was me out of the lineup. And you hear that, I have not been the worst guy. Now, of course, with any of these quotes, it's possible something could get a little bit lost in translation. That's at least possible. But these are pretty eye-opening quotes for Kaapo Kakko, who, again, tends to put things on himself. If things aren't going well, he'll put it on himself a little bit. And, certainly is not the kind of guy to call out teammates, but I think he's fed up, and I don't blame him. The funny thing about this to me, he says, I have not been the worst guy. He ended up being out there on the same line as the worst guy, which is, of course, Mika Zibanejad right now. That was the third line, Smith and Mika and Kakko. So that's a little bit awkward there. If that was indeed a shot at some of the veterans on this team. And as far as how Kakko did in this game, wasn't a whole lot. I mean, hey, you know what? I saw him at least talking to Riley Smith on the bench. That was interesting. That's more than a lot of the Rangers are doing right now. Every time the camera goes to show the Rangers on the bench, everybody's just like staring into space. Nobody's talking to each other. You might see one or two guys looking down at the tablet. And I know things aren't going well lately, but that's all the more reason to chatter a little bit, to try to pump each other up a little bit. And there's just none of that. At least I saw Kaapo Kakko actually talking to one of his teammates, one of his line mates in Riley Smith. There was also a situation, Kakko almost scored in this game, and this is kind of one of those plays that I think kind of sums up just how snake-bitten he's been over the years. He had a wide-open net, but unfortunately his shot hit the defenseman. Saros was on the other side of the net, and Kakko's shot is blocked by a D-man there. I mean, look, it's not like Kakko did anything great in this game either. Low ice time, 10 minutes and 14 seconds to be exact. And you have to wonder if his comments before this game hurt him in terms of the time on the ice that he saw. It's possible. At the same time, though, like Peter Laviolette just made Kaapo Kakko a healthy scratch. So I don't see a situation where they're going to put Kakko back into the lineup and then he's going to be out there for 18, 20, 22 minutes. That's just not going to happen. So the low ice time was probably to be expected. It's also possible that Kakko did himself no favors with some of those quotes that he had. But at the same time, at this point, if you're Kaapo Kakko, who even cares? Like, what do you have to lose? If Kakko hadn't said those things, instead of 10 minutes and 14 seconds of ice time, he would have gotten like 11 minutes and 4 seconds of ice time. Like, what's even the difference? You know what I mean? So I don't know. And the crazy thing about all this is that, Panarin sat out with an injury in this game here, second game that he's missed in a row with an injury. If Panarin's healthy and ready to go in the next one, I don't put it past the Rangers to scratch Kakko again. I don't think they should, but given the fact that they did it recently and now these comments that Kakko made, I think it's at least possible, and I think it's complete nonsense if that's what happens. But we're not even done with this. We're going to talk a little bit about Laviolette's response to some of Kakko's comments here, a couple more thoughts on Kakko, and then eventually we will shift our attention to just this wonderful hockey game that the Rangers played last night. We'll do all that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by SelectQuote. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. If you are in good health, they work with carriers that could get you the same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And these policies are more affordable than you think. You could get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. SelectQuote, they shop, you save. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. All right, let's go ahead, keep everything rolling on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out, as always, maybe more than ever, to the everydayers who are sticking with me, sticking with this team through this, what is turning into just an absolute car crash of a season. I don't think there's really any way to say it. In our next episode, we'll see what happens. We might wait until the game on Friday against the Stars to do another episode, but if somebody gets fired or traded, that's not the first time I've said that, but if somebody gets fired or traded between now and then certainly we will have an episode on that. We'll see. Going to play it by ear. But as of right now, let's go ahead and switch our attention to Peter Laviolette and his response to some of these comments by Kaapo Kakko, because, looking at these quotes, I think it's pretty obvious that the beat reporters got to talk to the players before the coach, because they brought some of Kakko's quotes to the attention of Peter Laviolette. Laviolette was asked about Kakko being mad about being healthy scratched. And, Laviolette basically said that that's what he wants. That's what he hopes that the reaction would be from somebody that ends up being a healthy scratch. But this is what he had to say. I'll keep those messages between him and I, but I think it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be upset. And yeah, that's pretty generic, but I think I'm on board with what Laviolette said there. You want players who care. I don't want somebody to be a healthy scratch and then their first question is, well, I still get paid, right? I want somebody that actually wants to be out there and actually does care and wants to compete and wants to make a difference. And I think Kakko is one of those guys on a team that seems to be lacking players like that right now. However, the next thing Peter Laviolette said, or I don't know if it was really the next thing, but a different quote that Peter Laviolette said during his presser the other day, I had to roll my eyes at least a little bit, because Laviolette was asked specifically about, Kakko's thoughts on it being easier to take a young player out of the lineup rather than a veteran player. This is what Laviolette had to say when he was asked about that. there's been older players that have sat out as well. The decisions that I make, they're tough decisions. Our team, Kaapo, we need to play better. We're 3-10 in our last 13 games, and that's not good enough. And they are, of course, now 3-11 in their last 14 games. So that's just wonderful. And look, the idea that Peter Laviolette has been scratching veteran players is honestly kind of ridiculous unless you look at it in the most literal way possible. Because if you take this quote 100% literally, then you could say, yes, he has scratched some veteran players. You could look at Jimmy Vesey. He's been a scratch for a handful of games this season as well. Johnny Brodzinski, he's been a healthy scratch more often than he's been in the lineup this season. And they are both, on the, they're both north of 30, right? So, yes, veterans have been scratched, but cut me a break with that. Coming into the season, Jimmy Vesey, at best for this Ranger team, was the number 11 forward, maybe the number 12 forward. And there's been times recently where he's been the number 13 forward. And Johnny Brodzinski, it's the same thing. I mean, I like Brodzinski and everything, but this guy is an NHL, AHL swingman. And when he's on the NHL roster, there's a very good chance, if everybody's healthy especially, that he's going to be a healthy scratch more often than not. So those guys are playing the exact role that you thought that they would play coming into the season. Maybe Vesey's been scratched a little bit more often than we thought that he might be at the start of the year, but none of this is surprising. These are guys that are here to play fourth line. I mean, Brodzinski can play up every once in a while, but you know what I mean. They're depth players, and they're guys that coming into the season you would wholeheartedly expect would be kind of in and out of the lineup, especially Brodzinski. So I don't want to hear about the two of them being healthy scratches. Now, to be completely fair to Laviolette, we did see Riley Smith as a healthy scratch not too long ago, and I think his play certainly warranted it. But I mean, okay, Smith, yes, he's a veteran, 33 years old. He's not one of the leaders on this team. He's not one of the mainstays. He's not somebody that's probably even going to be here past the trade deadline. So, yeah, he scratched a veteran, but that's not really the most impactful thing that I've ever seen done. And Kakko certainly deserves to be out there a hell of a lot more than Riley Smith does right now. Smith hasn't done anything like offensively terrible. Well, actually, last night he did. He got faked out of his skates by a rookie defenseman. But the bottom line, Kaapo Kakko has been a better player than Riley Smith this season, and I will certainly stand by that. So, this idea from Laviolette that sometimes I sit the veterans, how about sit one of the veterans that, deserves it? And to me, there are 4 offenders on this team. There were 5. There's down to 4 now. Between these 5 guys, none of them has been healthy scratch the entire season. We're talking about Mika Zibanejad. We're talking about Chris Kreider. Kreider was out of the lineup, and there were people wondering if maybe this was sort of a healthy scratching, but they're saying that he's hurt to kind of cover for him. I don't know for sure, but the bottom line, he was not designated a healthy scratch. So again, to go through this list, Mika Zibanejad has not been a healthy scratch. Chris Kreider has not been a healthy scratch. Jacob Trouba, when he was here, was never a healthy scratch. Ryan Lindgren has not been a healthy scratch. Keandre Miller, injured right now, was not playing well before he got hurt. He has not been a healthy scratch. To me, and there's more, it's not just these 5 guys, but to me, these are the 5 biggest offenders. And as far as I can tell, there hasn't even been any consideration to sitting one of these guys down for a game. Maybe there has. Behind the scenes, we don't know for sure what goes on. But those are the guys, I think, certainly more so than Kaapo Kakko, that deserve that punishment, for at least a game. There was one more quote from Kaapo Kakko that I want to mention here. And this one was pretty eye-opening, too. He was asked by the reporters about if he needs to go ask, the Ranger coaches about what's expected of him. And this is what Kakko said: "I'm not going to do that. They're going to say if they have something to say, but I'm not going there." So again, pretty eye-opening. And this was actually Molly Walker who shared this quote from Kaapo Kakko on Twitter. She also added that Kakko was as dejected as she had ever seen him. And it certainly sounds that way. He sounds frustrated. He sounds down. On one hand, just like any other player on this team, you got to shake it off and you got to move forward and keep going. But yeah, Kakko, I think, got the short end of the stick with this whole thing here. There's no way that, looking at everything that's happened with this team over the past month plus at this point, that Kakko should have been the fall guy. They made him the fall guy, and I think rightfully so and understandably so. He's pretty frustrated about that. Should also mention that Kakko's name continues to come up in trade rumors. We've actually talked about that, very slightly off and on, throughout, the last handful of episodes, really, but even today a little bit. Emily Kaplan reporting that Kakko is getting a lot of interest from teams in the Western Conference and specifically the Minnesota Wild. And I'll say this, same thing that I tweeted yesterday during the day before this game happened. One way or another, it feels like the Kaapo Kakko chapter with the New York Rangers is probably going to end. I don't know that he's going to be here past the trade deadline. It just doesn't really feel like he's a favorite of Drury, doesn't really feel like he's a favorite of Laviolette. We get the healthy scratching. His name is coming up in trade talks almost constantly. In the offseason, he only signed the 1-year extension, so it's not like they really committed to him in any meaningful way. There were rumors even in the offseason that he could be traded before the season started. Probably wouldn't have been a good time to do that because Kakko, missed a lot of time last year, didn't have a great season either, even when he was in there. I think Kakko's value is up a little bit now because teams see the kind of defensive hockey that he plays. And, he was contributing offensively for a while before, everybody just stopped scoring. But I think Kakko certainly has better value now than he did in the offseason. Do I want Kakko to be traded? I mean, not really, but for his own good, it's probably the best thing that's on the table right now. And honestly, his value's higher than it's been probably in at least a couple of years. So I think it's probably the time to make a move. This team is obviously going to do some retooling. There's going to be some players on the move. And I certainly think Kaapo Kakko could be one of them. And just to compare Kaapo Kakko to a veteran on this team, because we've kind of mentioned that off and on a little bit here too while we've been talking about Kaapo Kakko. This is what Mika Zibanejad had to say before the game about getting the least amount of ice time that he has ever gotten as a member of the New York Rangers, games where he got injured, of course, notwithstanding. But this is what Mika Zibanejad had to say about that. Honestly, I'm just focusing on today. That happened, and we have a new game today, so that's where I'm putting my energy and focus. Okay, what energy and what focus? That was Mika being energized and focused last night. And again, it's somewhat unfair, and I'll admit this. It's somewhat unfair, excuse me, for me to come on here and just nitpick everything, literally every little thing that Mika Zibanejad does and every little thing that he says. But Mika has made his own bed, and now he has to lie in it. We are more than 30 games into the season. He has played a brand of uncompetitive, seemingly passionless, just blasé hockey where it just doesn't seem like his head is in the game. It doesn't seem like his heart is in the game. He's certainly not doing anything to lead this team out of the rut that it currently finds itself in. So, yeah, I am going to pick apart every Mika Zibanejad shift. I am going to pick apart every single Mika Zibanejad quote. And this is a guy that's supposed to be a leader of this team. This is a guy that was in contention to be the captain when they ultimately went with Jacob Trouba. And this is what you've got, just more generic nonsense before the game. Just fed up with it, man. Again, at least it brings me back to my original point. At least Kaapo Kakko went off script a little bit. At least Kaapo Kakko gave a piece of his mind and said something that got some eyes to open. The Mika bot goes in there and just says bleep, bleep, bloop, blop, and just generic stuff that means absolutely nothing. So, yeah. And that was his response last night, by the way, to having the least amount of ice time in his Ranger career. And of course, you'll be shocked to learn that Mika Zibanejad was on the ice for both goals that the Predators scored. The one, he's kind of just gliding back on the back check, and they end up scoring on a rush. I mean, Chad Ruhwedel pinched. It's not all on Mika, and Ruhwedel should not have been pinching there, and you've got a 3-on-1 going the other way, and Vakanainen, who made his debut, he's the only guy back, and some good passing and everything. But yeah, just another nothing quote by Mika Zibanejad, followed by another nothing performance by Mika Zibanejad. I don't even know where you go from here when it comes to this guy. I'm at the end of my rope with Mika. We've got 5.5 more seasons of that. Let that sink in. So yeah, let's turn our attention to this game a little bit. We've just talked about Mika being on the ice for a couple of goals, but again, let's talk about this wonderful performance by the Rangers against the Predators. We will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by talking about this game, this 2-0 blanking by the worst team in the AHL, at least if you go by record. I mean, hey, maybe the Rangers are going to give them a little bit of a run for their money if things continue the way they're going right now. But record-wise, yes, the Nashville Predators came into this game with the worst record in the NHL. And I'll repeat something that I said earlier in today's episode. We are now, where are we here? We're 24 minutes in the episode. We're only just now breaking down what happened in the game last night because, again, the circus away from the rink is even crazier than the circus on the rink. But that's to take nothing away from just how miserable of a performance this was by the Rangers. I mentioned this. I recorded a quick video after the game last night, posted it on YouTube and whatnot, threw it on Twitter as well. We have a lot of candidates for worst Ranger game of the season, most disheartening loss of the season, worst effort of the season, most embarrassing loss of the season. There's a lot of different games in the running for all of those categories that I just mentioned. This one, though, without any doubt, has to be the absolute undisputed grand champion of most boring game that the Rangers have played all season. If you're ever in a situation where you need to get some sleep, there's a big day tomorrow, and you just can't fall asleep, and you're just in one of those nights, you just can't knock out, you're tossing and turning, do yourself a favor, never delete this game if you recorded it. Just put this game on. If you're having a hard time falling asleep, you will be out within 5 minutes into the game, because it's not like the Predators did anything interesting or exciting in this game either. I mean, they look like a terrible team that's just as lifeless as the Rangers, but it's just a situation where one team had to win, and it wasn't the Rangers. So, I mean, Mike, watching this game, it was just so choppy. There must have been 57 icings. I mean, one more icing was going to break me. And it was actually the Predators more so than the Rangers that were taking all the icings. But this game just never got going, never got out of first gear. The Rangers never got going. They never got out of first gear. I saw a lot of people on Twitter talking about, okay, decent start for the Rangers here. Pretty good start for the Rangers. I saw that quite a bit. I didn't even really like their start to this game that much. I guess I'm in the minority there. Now, I think the reason that a lot of people were saying this, and this does have some merit, is that the Rangers early in this game, the first few minutes, probably like the first 10 minutes or so, give or take, they were spending a good amount of time in Nashville zone. That is true. They at least, and that stands out because they've done so little of that in recent games. Anytime you get any kind of offensive zone possession, it's going to stand out right now. So they did that, but so what? They didn't do anything with it. And I realized, okay, you're at least establishing a forecheck, and, they're not in your zone, so they can't score. I mean, that's all well and good and everything, but did anybody see anything really that impressive while the Rangers were in Nashville zone early in this game? Were there any scoring chances where you felt like, oh, that's going in the net and you're starting to get out of your seat and cheer for a goal? I didn't see anything like that. Did you see the Rangers doggedly fighting for a puck along the boards? I didn't really see any of that either. Did you see any? I was going to say, did you see any fantastic passing? There were some decent passes, I suppose. But honestly, this is a whole lot of nothing. And again, it's nice that they at least got the puck in the O zone for a little while. It's sad that we have to celebrate that. That's all we've got at this point. But they didn't do anything special at the start of this game. I don't think it was really all that different than any of the recent games they've played. And part of the reason why they were spending so much time in Nashville zone is very likely because of the quality of their opponent. If they brought this kind of an effort against one of these teams that they're about to play, they've got Dallas, they've got Carolina, they've got the Devils, and I think the last two games this season in one order or the other are the Lightning and the Panthers. So they've squandered this soft part of their schedule, officially just completely wasted it. It's going to get a whole lot harder. That kind of start against any of those teams is not going to cut it, and they'll be down 1-0 in the game faster than they can say bleep. So, I know some people like their start. I didn't think it was anything special, not in the slightest. The lineup was a little bit different in this game, but again, to use the expression that a couple of you guys have used, that I've used in the past, you're just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. Cooley, Hedl, and Lafreniere, I like the fact that those three were still together. They at least do some things where, there's some good passing. There was one or two rushes that looked semi-dangerous in this game where you can at least believe that they might score a goal. Lafreniere was one-on-one with Saros in the one instance and was at least trying to pull a rabbit out of his hat, go in deep and make a couple of moves. These three didn't really grade out all that well. I mean, nobody did, but they were kind of near the bottom, which surprised me a little bit. I thought they had a better game than most of the Ranger players. Kreider, Trocheck, and Berard. I mean, I can't name a single thing that these guys did in this game. The only thing in this game that really stood out to me was the fight. We can go through the rest of the lineup real quick here. So you got Smith, Mika, Kakko, Edstrom, Carrick, VC, and then Lindgren and Fox, and then Jones and Schneider. Got to put Lindgren and Fox back together. And then Jones and Schneider, and then Vakanainen once again making his debut out there with Ruedel. I think it's time for Mancini to get back in there, but we'll see what they look to do going forward. The only thing that really stood out to this game for me, the only thing that was really any amount of fun was the fight that the Rangers got into. There was an interesting setup to this fight because Cooley put McCarron into the boards with a check, and the Rangers, their gate wasn't latched, or it wasn't latched properly, I guess, because Cooley delivers the hit, and the door swings open, and kind of a dangerous play. McCarron, it looked like his midsection caught the edge of the boards there that is now exposed thanks to the door being open or the gate being open. And McCarron was mad, but the response by the Predators I thought was garbage because there was a situation after this where Igor had to make like 3 or 4 straight saves on the doorstep. He's getting no help in this situation, and he eventually freezes the puck. And then you get a situation where, Cooley is kind of on his own, and Evangelista, I'm probably saying the name wrong, so I apologize. But he blindsides Cooley from behind and knocks him down to the ice. The fact that they tried to get revenge on Cooley in this situation for doing absolutely nothing wrong, that hit was 100% clean that Cooley put on McCarron a little bit earlier in the game. And he couldn't have possibly known that the gate was off the latch. So how are you going to go after somebody in this situation? I'm all for playing physical and getting in somebody's face and trying to stand up for your teammates. But the way they went after Cooley here, again, cross-check in the back, you would have thought that Cooley had just done something like incredibly dirty, like a Tom Wilson level of play here. And that just wasn't the case at all. So I thought that was garbage by the Predators. All of a sudden, Cooley gets back up. He goes after him. Lafreniere jumps on him as well. And then Delgaizo jumps on Cooley from behind. He's got him down on the ice in a headlock. Delgaizo is basically throwing punches, after, again, basically backfighting Will Cooley, attacking him from behind. Real tough guys, these Predators, in last place in the NHL. But they get up, they separate, and then Cooley throws down his gloves, and it's like, all right, we're doing this, man. Like, you got me from behind, now we're going to fight. Cooley did land one pretty solid punch, and then kind of wrestled Delgaizo down to the ice, and then some chirping. Cooley and Lafreniere were in the penalty box. The Rangers did get a power play after this, but again, you'll be shocked to learn that they did not take advantage. That it was another, fairly lifeless power play for the Rangers. I don't know, man. Everything about this team just sucks right now. Just top to bottom, front to back, left to right. The management, the coaching, the players. There's nothing to hang your hat on right now. Will Cooley, that's it. Will Cooley is still fun to watch. This fight was at least entertaining, and I like the fact that somebody on this Ranger team showed some competitive fire. But, man, you talk about just a nothing performance by this Ranger team after all the drama. These players seemingly just continue to pout, and I don't even know where you go from here, but we'll see. We'll keep tabs on everything that happens, and if anything else breaks during the week, we'll obviously have an episode on that, and we'll be back together on Friday to talk about Rangers and Stars, whatever happens in that game. And nobody better bail out on this, okay? You guys are in this with me. If I have to watch this nonsense night in and night out and watch the Rangers basically just stumble their way through another game, then everybody's got to be in this with me, all right? So that's the deal going forward. We're in this together. We're Ranger fans, ups, downs, everything in between. We're in this together. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, especially with this team playing just god-awful hockey. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.